Josh Waiting speaks about the catalyzing moments for growth. His biggest loss in his life, Josh Waiting on a chessboard in a world championship. He spent 3 months studying the position that lost him the championship. And that position that he studied resulted in him winning the world championship in martial arts and push hands Tai Chi. And there's that common denominator, right? Of those traders who huge monumental moments in their life where 99% run away from is just the greatest stepping stone for growth.
Because loss is like rejection, and they just can't handle rejection well. And it's interesting because a lot of the discussions and the common ideas around, handling loss in trading and trades, individual trades is, being able to take it and move on. That is very different, though, to a career-wide loss or a career-wide fork in the road where you're just taking a massive hit or you got to now make very consequential decisions to where you're going next. That is very different. And that in each circumstance with all these traders, that monumental existential crisis, they responded by, no, this is the start of something new. And it was. And in fact, it wasn't that our trader somehow reloaded his account and then worked his way up to millions the next year or something like that. No, in fact, he actually worked. He has continued on. He took 8 years, at least 8 years, to go onto a trading floor after that. And abroad in England.
And he was hiding the fact to his mother that he never lost her life savings. But inside, the inner voice was saying, I'm going to make this back for my mother and I'm going to reward my mother. But it might not happen today, tomorrow. And as you mentioned, 8 years later until he was able to potentially redeem himself from that loss or learn.
Yes, so it's the beginning of an 8-year redemption arc. And that included grinding away for a long time, working part-time jobs, working in a biscuit factory where, people still call him back years later. The boss is saying, you're a best employee ever. Do you want to come back? They're calling up a trader who is now worth several millions to do that. For very good reasons, which we'll get into in a minute, about his perfectionist obsession attitude. Long story short, he ended up on the floor first time in 8 years later. He was already, well into his 30s. And then he had, the biggest of opportunity costs in terms of career direction, life direction, had probably, savings of maybe a year, less. So that then created a very unique trader because you see, unlike people who have stumbled into our profession, who can take their opportunity for granted, who swing and while away and be like, oh yeah, okay, cool, whatever. Here's someone who said, if I lose this opportunity, I will lose 8 years worth of effort and focus to get the life savings back.
Yeah. So
that forged a very, very unique trader from the outset who prioritized safety above all else.
I never thought of it as much as like that. What you just expressed now, Bogdan, that he had to create, there was this 8-year journey where some junior traders, luckily located near a floor, but it took him 8 years to get onto a floor where he felt he could now learn and pick up his game and acquire those spare parts, which we speak about in the chapter on the student. 8 years. Think about the soul-blooded drive of that moment of losing the money versus, say, traders who just arrive on the floor, have all the optionality in the world. He gave himself no options, and he was just dog-minded that he will somehow, from working in biscuit factories on an Italian, from an Italian small village, that he's going to arrive onto a trading floor.
And then that's forged this extremely unique trader who is quite literally, he says he forgoes additional upside, forgoes variance in the sense of having extreme safety in his trading. And again, we can talk more about that a bit later. That is not to say he doesn't take risk. He takes ludicrous risk, caveated with an extreme control of his trade environment and so on. Again, we'll get into it. But yes, 8 years, and then now it's his only shot. To reiterate one more time, it is not someone who just stumbled onto a trading floor through happenstance or through just applying willy-nilly through a program and just happened to make it through. And then yes, this was his present, and then he came onto the floor in 2007 and then spotted a trade through the financial crisis, which is the centerpiece of the beginning of his chapter, that happened in the financial crisis that he couldn't trade or trade in any kind of realistic size, that he observed through his own powers of observation, saw a pattern which he could potentially use, and then spent the next decade building a way to traded through a strategy.
The power of curious obsession, that this trade that he saw in 2007, as you mentioned, observed it. And then observation is a function of, wow, that was an unusual move. Angus Fletcher, I work with Angus Fletcher, talks about exceptional information. Humans are incredible at observing exceptional information. The outliers, machines discount them. And this observation of this move in the US equities, and he told himself back then in 2000, he had that, almost that foresight. And he said to himself, that's a trade that if I see it again, I'm going to make $1 million from that trade. Now, we know what the story happened. So, yeah, so just that type of foresight. So then, as you're mentioning, fast forward to March 2020. But even before March 2020, I don't know how much we're going to elaborate on the story, but before March 2020, the trade actually popped up in 2015, and he was unable to exploit it.
Mm-hmm.
And he was unable to exploit it because, sadly, he was at a funeral, and he had been preparing for that trade for over 5 or 6 years. So he missed that. And the trade didn't appear its hit until
I think there was one more instance in between then, but it didn't materialize exactly within the parameters he wanted, on Trump's first election victory. Then it coalesced into the events of March 2020, which again was many near misses, had many, shall we say, plot twists, which I'll leave slightly more towards the chapter because we build that through his chapter. And then that led to, his career goal, perhaps life goal, one can say.
But even before this plot twist.
Yes.
Even before this plot twist. What happened before? Because he had another plot twist just before that plot twist. A big one.
A lot of these traders had to restart from zero. We mentioned it in the introduction. That is, restarting from zero, not because of bad trading or bad circumstances or fault of their own. It is because of management and mismanaging funds at an old, now defunct prop firm, which the Razor was a part of at the time. Go to 2016, the traders all wake up, no funds in accounts, money is gone, and the Razor, the whole, since 2007, was living in a, as he called it, a dreary small town in England, spending literally probably a fraction of a % of what he was making, withdrew nothing from his trading account. So he was grinding his way up to $1 million throughout the entire period. And just as he then made the move to Poland, just as he then started to want to withdraw some of the money to, pay for an apartment, for an office and so on, it all got taken away.
And we're talking about one day you've got a 7-figure plus trading account. The next morning, it's gone. And you've got approximately in your pocket, in your personal bank account, after a decade of trading, $60,000. All that $60,000, you're having to give it to lawyers. Half of that, a decade's worth of money gone, left with approximately 30,000 in your personal pocket. You're over 40, and you're in a place that the majority would just cave in. The emotionally ridden, grief, anger, all those emotions that stop you pushing forward. But this was the release. And this was truly the rise of the proverbial phoenix. And Bogdan, if that moment, and we're capturing in that chapter, there were a lot of incidents that had to take place, but he had to start over. He said, I won't come back to London. I love Poland. I'd rather be in the streets of Poland than be in an apartment in London, in a penthouse apartment in London. He was living his best years for the first time, decade, sharing rooms in London, having his own nice apartment in the tallest building in this Poland town. And all of a sudden, the world just changed. His world just changed, and many other traders within this firm's world changed. Losing that 7 figures, what next?
What next was 2 months of no trading, followed by incredible returns trading consistency, to the point where if you look at his return statistics in 2016, you would know that none of this had ever happened if you were none the wiser about the wider story.
Because he recapped with a very close friend who supported him to recap, with an account of approximately, $50,000.
It was under 100,000, just shy of that. And yes, he refunded with, the small team, the partnership between Axia and FCT Europe at the time, and then was flying because, he was then given the the leverage, the size, but most importantly, the trust that he is this very, very, very special trader that can grow exponentially and in a non-linear fashion.